There are plenty of discounted apartments and buildings in New York. Did you know that there's roughly 100 buildings across the city that offer apartments for sale 20% or even 35% below market value? How to find them or how to avoid them, I'll tell you in this video. I'll also show you the cheapest apartment in Manhattan, so pay attention.
Prices are low, however, a lot of these units sit there for a long time before they get sold. Why? Is there something wrong with them? The short answer is yes, there's something going on, and I'll tell you what.
These buildings sit on the land that belongs to a landowner, not the building. So the building does not own the land underneath, and it's called land lease building or ground lease.
In New York, many land-lease co-ops date to the late 1960s and early 1970s. Some landowners decided to keep the land rather than sell it to a developer. The land is generally leased for around 50 to 100 years. Most buildings on land leases are co-ops. Their monthly maintenance fees are usually much higher than in comparable apartments. It's because the land rent is wrapped into their monthly fees. At the end of the lease, if there is no automatic renewal, the building reverts to the landowner. That could leave the residents of the building with no rights to occupy their units and no equity in their shares. You can simply become a renter in your own apartment.
When building's land lease approaches expiration, two things can happen. Usually the co-op board and the landowner meet to discuss terms and renew the lease. Most likely, the ground rent goes up, which becomes residents' responsibility to pay.
This happened at 150 East 61st Street. After intense negotiations with the landowner, the agreement was finalized just one day before the co-op would have reverted into a rental. Under the new 99-year lease, co-op's rent doubles to $260,000, which will cost the residents additional about $250 a month.
Option 2, the apartment owners can try to buy the land for themselves.
301 East 63rd Street took on a $45 million mortgage. Monthly fees have skyrocketed and apartment values went down. 167 East 61st Street is also no longer land lease. While the purchase moved homeowners into a more stable zone, one longtime resident saw her assessment exceed the value of her one-bedroom co-op by $900,000, forcing her to sell.
How well the negotiations go depends on who owns the land.
Battery Park City is a land lease area in New York, but it has a different legal structure than land lease buildings elsewhere. Risk is lowest when the government owns the land underneath the building. This neighborhood was built on a land excavated from the original World Trade Center and a few other major construction projects. The community is owned and managed by a public benefit corporation created by New York State, and their mission is to plan, create, coordinate, and maintain a balanced community. In 2011, the government worked with 11 condo buildings in Battery Park City on their land lease and lowered scheduled lease payments. In general, the government isn't going to squeeze every last dollar out of its tenants and doesn't want to kick you to the curb.
There are various non-profit organizations that have also rented out the land for land lease throughout the city. Non-profits value stability and predictability over the absolute maximum payment.
For example, 100 Barrows lease payments are essentially locked in for the entire 99-year lease, and buyers can determine what the worst-case scenario is.
Like most for-profit investors, private landlords want every dollar possible from their tenants.
100 West 57th Street or Carnegie House lease expired in March 2067. Owners in the buildings like this are exposed to significant amount of risk around the land lease payments due to the market appraisals.
Every 10 to 20 years, the third-party appraiser comes in and determines the value of the land under the building. If the value of the land goes up, the owners will face a rent increase.
And this is where the cheapest apartment in Manhattan is located. The next rent reset in this building is coming in 2025. If the building will purchase the land, each shareholder will be required to pay a big assessment. Owners of this unit will have to come up with approximately $580,000 in 2025. If the land under Carnegie House is still appraised at $280 million in 2025, it will likely boost the annual land rent to over $21 million, about 5 times the current amount.
Now, how can you benefit from land lease buildings? Well, if your land contract doesn't expire for another 80 years, let's say, you have not much to worry about right now. Also, you can afford a larger apartment and get a building in a desirable location.
There are cases when the land lease was renegotiated soon after buyers moving in. The maintenance fee went up 1%, the lease was extended for additional 66 years, and because of that, the property value went up by approximately $90,000 from the time of purchase.
If you find yourself on a smaller budget looking for a large space for less than 5 years, and you're willing to take a risk, this might be an option. But remember, sellers of land lease apartments have a smaller buyer pool. Banks are unlikely to provide a 30-year mortgage for a unit whose land lease expires in 20 years, so it might not be easy to sell. If the lease comes to an end in a short time and the board has no idea whether it will be renewed or the building will be offered for sale, stay away until you have more information.